when I was pregnant. My husband and his mistress died in a car accident together. My mother-in-law knelt in front of me, begging me with tears and snot to give birth to the child in my womb. She said that as long as I gave birth to the child, I would be the benefactor of the He family. They would help take care of the child. I could find another good man. However, after I gave birth to the child, my father-in-law and mother-in-law moved into my house grandly on the pretext of taking care of the child. They tortured and abused me. That bastard, when he was 12 years old, pushed me downstairs when I wasn't paying attention. Die sooner. You made me do homework and didn't let me play games. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn on the day of my husband's car accident. The phone kept ringing, noisy and irritating. I tried hard to open my eyes and adapt to the surrounding environment. Still young body, beautiful face, slim figure. After repeatedly confirming, I knew that I was reborn 12 years ago. On the day of my husband's car accident, I couldn't help clenching my fist and reaching out to touch my still flat belly. I was less than 3 months pregnant. The phone rang again, and I answered it. Excuse me. Is this Angelina? Is Dean your husband? A woman's voice came from the phone. Yes. I am. Who are you? I deliberately asked. I know that this is a call from the traffic police. The content and voice are exactly the same as in my previous life. In my previous life, after learning the news of Dean's death in a car accident, I only felt that the sky had fallen. My eyes went black and I almost couldn't stand still and fainted. In this life, my whole body was trembling. I was afraid that if I laughed too loudly, others would think I was crazy. The next thing is easy to handle. Following the normal process. After confirming the identity of the body, I directly dragged the body to the crematorium before my good mother-in-law arrived. When I came out of the crematorium, Dean's parents rushed up. Dean's mother slapped me in the face and scolded, "You! How dare you burn my son's body?" I touched my burning face. Dean's mother had a fierce face with bulging cheeks and saliva splattering everywhere. Angelina, if you weren't so useless, how would my son sneak out and suffer such a disaster? Which man doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? It's only you, a poisonous woman, who is jealous and forces men to run away. If you were a good one, how would my son find someone else? You. I seriously summarized Dean's mother's incoherent and absurd words. If I were good enough, beautiful enough, charming enough, and coquettish this enough, her son Dean wouldn't find a mistress. If I were virtuous enough, I should let Dean bring his mistress home to play. And I still have to serve tea and water. In this way, her son wouldn't doft about, and naturally wouldn't die. However, people who are mean will be punished by heaven. Thinking of all kinds of things in my previous life, I swung the urn at her head. Dean's mother blocked it with her arm. She cried out in pain. Immediately, she shouted ferociously, "You still dare to fight back?" Then, she would unite a group of relatives and friends of the He family and clamor to beat me. Oh, and he. Do you still want your good son's ashes? I held up the urn and pretended to smash it on the ground. Dean's mother couldn't care less about arguing with me. Snatching her good son's ashes was important. I watched her holding the ashes and sitting down at the entrance of the crematorium, crying bitterly for her poor son. And he. I've given you Dean's ashes. If you want to keep them, buy a cemetery yourself. Arrange the funeral as you like. There's no need to notify me. I squatted down in front of her and just looked at her. Before I finished speaking, she suddenly jumped up and shouted, "Angelina! What do you mean? My son just passed away. Are you going to find a wild man?" "What wild man?" I smiled faintly. And he. "Look. I am young and beautiful. Do I have to be a widow for your son?" Tsk. Of course I need to find someone to take a look, and find a suitable one. After all, your son died with someone else. I have no reason to keep him in mind. Right? Goodbye. After saying that, I got up and left. Dean's mother seemed stunned. Probably. She had never seen me so strong. In the evening, I was in the house preparing to pack things. Dean's mother, holding Dean's memorial tablet in her arms, came to my house hurriedly with a group of people and pried open my door. Yes, she found someone and pried open the door directly. Not opened by me. Angelina. We need to have a good talk, she said arrogantly. First of all, my son is dead. You need to observe mourning for my son for 3 years. During these 3 years, you need to live in our Lee family. Eat vegetarian food and chant Buddhist scriptures to eliminate your sins. After 3 years, if you want to get married, I won't care about you, but you need to return the betrothal gift money of my family. Saying that, she slapped a list in front of me. Speaking of the betrothal gift, it's really ridiculously funny. Dean said he gave me 180 yuan as betrothal gift. But I didn't even touch this money. He said that this money was counted as the down payment for the house. Write my name on the real estate certificate, and it would be counted as the betrothal gift money. In my previous life, I had never figured out this account clearly. In this life, I understand. In fact, when Dean married me, he didn't pay a penny for the betrothal gift. Just added my name to the real estate certificate. And I still need to bear the mortgage money. I contacted the funeral home to hold a memorial service for Dean. As Dean's wife, you need to wear mourning clothes and keep vigil for my son. Dean's mother said imposing lie. In my previous life, as soon as Dean died, I was in a daze and let her manipulate and humiliate me. Until I fainted in front of the mourning hall, and they learned that I was pregnant. Dean's mother immediately changed her attitude. With a smiling face, she coaxed me to give birth to the child. She said that it was the only seed of the old He family and the heir of the He family's incense. If I gave birth to a child, I would be the benefactor of the old He family. Even, she said that she could give me all the family's money for safekeeping. But in fact, after the child was born, when I was in confinement, she began to torture and humiliate me. She forced me to eat the boiling, greasy pig's trotters soup without any salt or seasonings. If I didn't eat it, she would hold me down and pour it in. She said that if I didn't eat it, where would her eldest grandson get milk to drink? I had enough breast milk and didn't need to eat such things at all. Besides, there were all kinds of milk powder on the market. When I vomited from eating it, she began to scold me for being delicate, pretentious, and affected. The child didn't use diapers. She insisted on using old-fashioned cloth diapers. When they were dirty, she wouldn't let me use the washing machine. She said that raising a child was not easy. They were all old. Where would they have so much money? They needed to save where they could. They also said that they lived like this back then. Why was I so delicate when I gave birth to a child? I didn't even want to wash diapers. What did I want to do? She scolded me, saying that if I didn't have the life of a princess, I shouldn't have princess diseases. I should work honestly and raise her eldest grandson. The past events flashed through my mind like lightning. I looked at her messy relatives and Dean's mother's fierce face. Angelina, look at you. Your husband just died and you are wearing such bright clothes. What's wrong? Can't you hold back so soon and want to seduce men? I have nothing to do with you anymore. I raised my eyebrows and smiled slightly. I said, and he. From the moment your son died. So, it has nothing to do with you who I seduce. Is it only allowed for your son to seduce little vixens and go on a self-driving trip and get himself killed? If you are so capable, why didn't you take good care of your son? As for the betrothal gift you mentioned, I don't know what it is. You brought people here today and pried open my door. It belongs to trespassing on private property. I have already reported it to the police. I am familiar with the local police officer in this area. We have added each other on WeChat. Just now, I sent him a message and asked him to come and take a look. He just replied to me that he is on his way. In addition, your son's cheating is already a fact. Even if he didn't die, I would file for divorce. So, his morning haul. Please keep vigil by yourself. If you want to observe mourning for your son, you can do it. As soon as I finished speaking, Dean's mother jumped up, pointed at me, and trembled with anger. Angelina, do you still have any shame? You didn't serve your man well at home, and let him die an unnatural death. I haven't asked you yet. How dare you do such a thing that violates women's morality? What cheating? My son is dead. How dare you slander him? Even if we take a step back. If you were a good one, would my son cheat? Angelina, kneel in front of my son's memorial tablet all night and reflect well. Saying that, she took out the memorial tablet she had prepared today, and walked around the room, preparing to find a place to place it. There was also an old woman who came with Dean's mother. She was superstitious and looked around everywhere. She said this position was not good and that position was not good either. Finally, she said that the living room TV should be removed or rebuilt into a Buddhist shrine to place Dean's memorial tablet. The old woman also said, Angelina, Dean had a bloody disaster and died on the street. I'm afraid he won't be at peace even after death. Those close to him need to copy 100 volumes of the Sutra of Rebirth to eliminate sins and be reborn as humans. Angelina, you need to work hard. In addition, Buddhist scriptures are different from others. You need a calm and pious heart. So, you can't eat meat and can't wear makeup. You need to wear linen clothes and kneel in front of the desk to copy for it to be effective. I nodded, looking at those relatives of the He family who were about to dismantle my TV. I immediately coughed gently and said, Everyone, I would like to advise you that your behavior now already belongs to trespassing on private property. If you damage my things again, I have the right to hold everyone responsible. The man who was about to dismantle the TV paused and couldn't help looking at Dean's mother. Dean's mother shouted at me, Angelina, don't you plan to invite my son's memorial tablet back? I took the memorial tablet that had just been made this afternoon from the old woman's hand, threw it on the ground with a snap, and then stepped on it. Old lady, listen up. Even when your son was alive, I wanted to step on his face like this. Take your son's memorial tablet and get out of here immediately. Old lady, he rushed over to hit me. However, just at this moment, the police arrived. Looking at the people's policeman in uniform, although old lady he was domineering, she was still a little afraid. So, she hurriedly put on a different face, smiled apologetically, and struck up a conversation with the police. I explained the whole story. The police took a few photos of the door and asked, who pried open the door? The man who was about to dismantle the TV earlier couldn't help but move back a bit. Even the most ignorant person knows that damaging other people's property requires compensation. Old lady Lee hurriedly explained that this was her son's house. Her son died, and I locked her out. She had no choice but to find someone to pry open the door. The police made a record and asked them to leave. How could old lady Lee be willing to leave? She sat on the ground and started mourning, crying for her ill-fated son. Facing this situation, the police were also helpless. Seeing this, old lady he became even more outrageous. She lay on the ground, her fat body sprawled across the living room, rolling around, mourning, and making a scene. She cursed at me. She called me a jinx who had killed her son. She scolded me for not serving men well and being immoral. She accused me of being malicious and not being able to stale only just after Herman died. I waited for her to make a fuss for a while. Then I walked up to her, leaned close to her ear, and whispered, I'm pregnant. What? What did you say? Old lady he was startled, and suddenly sat up from the ground. Her eyes scrutinized my stomach. There was a hint of a smile on the corner of my mouth. For all the encounters in my previous life, in this life, I must repay tenfold. Give her hope and then let her be completely desperate. You're not lying to me? Old lady he asked me. Of course not. I went back to my room and took out the pregnancy test stick and showed it to her. Looking at the two bright red lines, old lady he exclaimed, Heaven has eyes. A he family should not be extinct. Woo woo woo. This time, old lady he really cried. Joy and excitement were evident on her face. Old lady he hurriedly called the group of people she had brought who were making trouble and said, "Let's go. Don't disturb my good daughter-in-law's rest." I smiled. This speed of changing faces is as fast as that of such one opera actors. Just now, I was still a jinx. A little whore. A slut. Now, I am her good daughter-in-law? Although old lady he coaxed and deceived me, wanting me to attend Dean's funeral, I still refused. I contacted a real estate agent and prepared to sell that house. After consulting a lawyer, although the real estate certificate of my house only has the names of me and Dean. However, as Dean's parents, they have partial inheritance rights. Fearing that they would make trouble, I especially invited old lady he over. At first, old lady he didn't agree. This house held their beautiful memories of their son. Auntie, I specially invited a 4-inch to take a look. I said to old lady he, this house has the wrong orientation and the wrong floor. Look, this house was a wedding room. As a result, not long after I got married to Dean, he died on the street. Do you know why I hastily cremated his body? It was really impossible to look at. On that side, only half was left. Dead without a whole body. Old lady he sat opposite me, crying with a tissue in her hand. This is not the point, I said earnestly. This house is on the west side. The rising sun can't shine on it. It's not good for having children. Saying this, I deliberately touched my little belly. Do you know why the place where the crown prince lived in ancient times was called the East Palace? It's because the East is good for having children. Old lady he nodded while wiping her tears with a tissue and said, "You're right. This house is indeed unlucky. Sell it quickly." I smiled and said, "Don't worry. After the house is sold and I get the money, I will transfer your share of the money to your account according to the inheritance law." Old lady he hurriedly said, "Angelina, we're family." Saying these things is being too distant. I scolded you before because I was sad about Dean's matter. You have to understand me. Mom, don't worry. When you give birth to the child, I'll come and take care of the baby for you. I'll be your nanny and work like a cow and a horse. Well, in my previous life, she also said similar things to me. Since the price I listed for the house was more than 10 lower than the market price, it's sold quickly. In half a month, I got the money. Then, I consulted a lawyer. The house belonged to me and Dean equally. As his legal wife, I could also inherit 2/3 of his property. The remaining money was about 110,000. I transferred it to my good father-in-law Charles. Charles, mourn in peace. Well, in fact, I want to remind you that although Dean is gone, you are still alive and young. If you find a young woman with a good physical condition, maybe you'll have a son again. After saying that, I hung up the phone. Charles, a man in his 50s, is really not a good person. He usually listens to old lady he for family matters. He just eats, drinks, and sleeps. When his son died, he was also depressed for a while. In my previous life, not long after I gave birth to that evil child, old lady he was busy tormenting me every day for her precious grandson and had no time to take care of him. He got involved with a divorced woman in her 30s at the Mochhorn parlor. He was caught in bed by old lady he, causing a huge commotion and becoming the laughingstock of our community. In this life, if I abort the child, it will naturally cut off the he family's thoughts. For his male chauvinism and his so-called inheritance, Charles will want to divorce old lady he and find a young woman to give birth to a big fat son for him to carry on the family line. I deliberately gave the money to Charles. This old man, as long as he has some money on him, he can't help but want to gamble. And in this world, the things that are most likely to cause trouble are nothing more than prostitution, gambling, and drugs. While the house was being sold, I contacted the hospital and prepared to have a painless abortion. However, that night, I had a dream. I dreamed of Dean. Angelina, you can't abort the child. Absolutely not. Why? I asked him with a smile in my dream. Because this is my only chance of reincarnation. Dean said hurriedly. I smiled. Do you think I will give you a chance of reincarnation? He rushed at me, his face hideous and terrifying, gradually merging with his appearance before he died. I was awakened by fright. When I woke up, I was covered in sweat. Thinking carefully, if I can be reborn, why can't he be reincarnated? But reincarnation is his business. Wanting to be reborn in my belly is absolutely impossible. The next day, I came to the hospital and prepared for the operation. Suddenly, old lady he rushed over and stopped me. Angelina, how dare you deceive me? She was incoherent and stammered. Did you plan to abort the child from the very beginning? You just wanted to sell the house. So you deceived me? If it weren't for my son appearing in my dream, I still wouldn't know your malicious heart as a poisonous woman. I sneered inwardly but said, Mom of the He family, your son is dead. After this child is born, milk powder and diapers all cost money. Besides, I had a prenatal examination. This child has super male syndrome. The doctor doesn't recommend giving birth. Saying this, I ignored old lady he and was about to follow the doctor into the operating room. But suddenly, old lady he knelt down in front of me with a plop and hugged my leg. Crying and shouting, she said, Angelina, Mom begs you. This is a life. How can you be so cruel and deprive him of his right to be born when he hasn't even seen the light of day? Everyone, please help me persuade my daughter-in-law. My son is dead, and she wants to abort the child. Poor me, an old woman. At this age, I have sent off my black-haired son with white hair. I am looking forward to having a grandson. But my daughter-in-law, because she doesn't want to have a burden, insists on aborting the fetus in her belly. This is not cutting off the He family's descendants. What else do I have to look forward to? I might as well die. Saying this, she was about to hit her head against the wall again. The people in the hospital were so panicked that they hurriedly persuaded and stopped her. Some people also persuaded me that it's not easy for the old lady. It's better to give birth to the child. It's really easy for them to say. Will they raise the child? Old lady he kowtowed, rolled around, and made a fuss. My scheduled operation couldn't be done. Well, it was also something I expected. After all, in my previous life, I was softened by her words and actions. Some busboides took videos of her in the hospital and posted them online. Many people scolded me, saying that I was inhumane and actually killed my own child with my own hands. In this life, there are still busboides who took videos and posted them online. I don't care. I just posted the video of old lady he making trouble at my house online as well. Since I was reborn, I have been fully prepared. I installed surveillance cameras at home. Instantly, the wind changed. Oh my God. This old woman actually asks the wife to be widowed for her deceased husband, and even wear mourning clothes. Why doesn't she wear mourning clothes for her son? Oh my God. This man was cheating. Cheating. Sisters. Family members. Look. He died in a car accident while going out with his mistress. Oh my dear mother. In this situation, she still asks the woman to give birth to the child? Abort it quickly. A man who cheats during his wife's pregnancy doesn't deserve inheritance. He deserves to be extinct. If I were to say, this man's death is well deserved. Dean's cheating and dying together with his mistress became a hot search. As for the child in my belly, whether to keep it or not didn't attract much attention anymore. Some people said that I should respect life and give birth to this child. However, as soon as this statement came out, it was drowned in criticism. Will you raise it if it's born? Will you donate 10 million to the young lady as a child rearing fund? What old lady he did to me was even more criticized. Some people said she was the remnant of feudal ideology. Some feminists also started to use this incident to make a point. I just watched coldly as things slowly fermented. During this period, I went to a temple, burned incense, and worshipped Buddha. After being reborn once, it is after all the blessing of the gods. I hope even more that in this life, I can be safe and sound and stay away from that extremely annoying family of the He family. I told the old monk in the temple that I often couldn't sleep well recently and dreamed that there were evil spirits pestering me. The old monk gave me a talisman and said that it would be fine if I wore it close to my body. It's quite miraculous. Or maybe it's a psychological effect. Since I wore the talisman given by the old monk, I have actually been in a peaceful state of mind. Dean has never been able to appear in my dream again. In the past 2 days, old lady he has been too busy to make trouble for me. She heard rumors that Charles is gambling outside and having a wild time. She knows her own man's character better than I do. So, she is busy chasing and blocking her man. I spent a little money and hired a paparazzi to help keep an eye on things. Soon, I found out that Charles took the 110,000 yuan I gave him. His luck was really good. He actually won several consecutive Machorn games. He began to dislike the small stakes of the Machorn games in the small Machorn parlor and wanted to play for bigger stakes. Through an introduction, he went to a big place. There are not only Machorn but also other things. All kinds of them. Charles has broad and his horizons. Not only that, there are several hot beauties accompanying him every day when he plays cards. They tease him so much that he is completely infatuated and doesn't want to go home. My words made his mind active. In this life, although he has a bad nature, he is very afraid of his wife. Perhaps it's because old lady Lou is so tough. Perhaps although he is very scum and bad, he still attaches great importance to his descendants and wants to give his children a stable and comfortable living environment. So, Charles has never thought of getting a divorce. Now that his son is dead and he has money in his hand, these few days of a comfortable life make him feel that this is the life he wants. So, after being chased and blocked by old lady he several times and having his Machorn table overturned and losing face in front of outsiders and the woman he likes, Charles got angry. He grabbed old lady he and beat her up. Then, he pointed at old lady he's nose and told her that he wanted a divorce. He wanted to marry a young and beautiful woman and have another chubby little boy with her. Old lady he inquired about it and found out that not only did I give the money from selling the house to Charles, but I also once instilled in him the idea of letting him find another woman to have a son. So, she and Charles came to find me together. Old lady he came to argue with me. As for Charles, after hearing the gossip of the people in the Machorn parlor, he thought that when I sold the house, I should at least give them half. Even some people said that the house belonged to his son. Now that it is sold, all the money should be given to the two of them for their old age. Not only that, now, he wants to marry a new wife and raise a son. It's not a small amount. So, he must come to me to get the money back. After I sold the house, I still rented in the original community. Looking at them coming aggressively, I slowly drank coffee and calmly watched old lady he spouting vulgarities. Angelina, you are pregnant with my son's child. How can you still drink this kind of thing? While saying that, she was about to pour out my coffee. Why are you so greedy? Yes. In my previous life, when I was in confinement, apart from stewing greasy pig's trotters soup without any seasonings, she only gave me rice and green vegetables. Occasionally, when there was fish cooked at home and I was about to taste it, she slapped me on the face with a chopstick and scolded me. You are so greedy. Is this something you can eat? At that time, my face was slapped and broken, and blood was dripping from the corner of my mouth. In this life, seeing a similar scene, I couldn't hold back and splashed a cup of coffee on her face. Old lady he, talk nicely and don't touch things randomly. Old lady he was splashed with a cup of coffee, and was very embarrassed. Just as she was about to make a scene, I said coldly, Old lady he, look at you. You are old and ugly and don't know how to serve men. Only Charles can tolerate you until now. If it were someone else, they would have kicked you away long ago. Old lady, he was obviously stunned. Next to her, Charles was uneducated. Hearing this, he loudly said, "What my daughter-in-law said makes sense. You woman, don't nag at me. Be careful or I'll beat you to death." I tried hard to hold back, so that I didn't laugh. Yes, this is the effect I want. You still come to argue with me. I continued. If you were a good person, how could Charles find someone else outside? It must be that you don't know how to serve men. That's why Charles doesn't want to come home. Now that your son is dead and you are too old to give birth, you should take the initiative. Give the family's money to Charles. You leave with nothing and let Charles marry a young one and give birth to a chubby little boy for him. This is also good for continuing the He family's inheritance. What's your intention by making such a fuss? Aren't you trying to make the He family extinct? I threw back at her the same set of words she had said to me. Old lady, he opened her mouth wide. She wanted to say something several times, but could only stammer and curse a few vulgar words. Yes, she hopes that I can give her a grandson, and then use this to torture me and torment me. With that so-called bastard child, she has a reason and an excuse to say to others that I and she are family. And I, this weak and bullied daughter-in-law, am the servant she torments for life. In this life, I finally escaped. As for the so-called He family's inheritance, the pit she dug herself, let her bury herself in it. Charles, do you think I'm right? I deliberately said. Men gambling and drinking are just social needs. As a woman, if you don't serve well, how can you go and make trouble and ruin his face? Don't you know that a man's face is more valuable than anything? I can't even stand listening to these words myself. But Charles nodded repeatedly and said, "This woman is just ignorant." Old lady, his face was ashen. She was tottering. It seemed that my words had directly hit her heart. Her lips were trembling, repeating a few vulgar words. "Charles, I understand what you mean. You said it on the phone." I said, "Well, you find a lawyer to calculate how much money I should give you." Charles is a man without his own opinion. Frowning, he said, "Still need to find a lawyer? Well, Charles, you have to know that I have nothing to do with you anymore." I said, "Regarding money matters, of course, we have to settle it clearly. How can we talk nonsense? You find a lawyer to calculate. I will give you as much money as I should. I won't short you a penny." Hearing me say this, Charles happened to have a call coming in. People in the Mothorn parlor urged him to come over. He didn't have time to talk more with me and left in a hurry. Old lady, he was stunned as if in a daze. After a long time, she suddenly gritted her teeth and said, "Angelina, you are so vicious." I smiled and asked, "What vicious thing did I do?" "You actually instigated him to marry someone else?" Old lady, he scolded. "Do you know that I have been with him since I was 18? I have suffered and endured hardships. Now that I am old, how can he abandon me? This heartless bastard." I laughed and said, "Old lady, you followed him since you were 18. You suffered and endured hardships. You couldn't even take good care of a son, and let him die. What achievements do you have? I think you should quickly tidy up your home and wait for Charles to marry a new person. You should serve him well. It's important. Don't stay here and make trouble with me. It's useless. You can't even keep your own man, and you still come to make trouble with me? What a shame." The following events were just as I expected. Charles made a fuss about getting a divorce from old lady he. How could old lady he agree? Charles beat her up. After beating her, he stayed in the Mothorn parlor every day. He didn't go to work anymore, and gave up his job. Old lady, he was busy looking for her own man. Naturally, she didn't have time to find trouble with me. I made an appointment for an operation. This time, I successfully aborted the fetus. Looking at that lump of dirty flesh, I smiled. Since it doesn't want to be human, it should never have a chance to see the light of day again. I stayed in the hospital for one night. The next day when I was discharged, I went to the airport and headed straight for Sonia. In my previous life, I always wanted to see the sea. See the blue sky and white clouds. However, my husband's family was vicious, and my natal family was the last straw that crushed me. In this life, I don't want to care about that family that favors sons over daughters anymore. After I arrived in Sonia, I turned off my phone. Every day, I just ate, slept, and read books. 2 weeks later, when my phone was fully charged and turned on, the phone had been blown up. The messages were also exploding. First, my good younger brother asked me where I was. He asked me to get some money for him. He said that mom was hospitalized. Looking further back, it told me that mom was dead. When I saw the message of my mom's death, the hand holding the phone couldn't help but tremble a little. In my previous life, it was also at this time that my mom had a sudden myocardial infarction and was sent to the hospital for rescue. I paid money and took care of her. As a result, she forced me to take out money to buy a house for my good younger brother. She said that my husband was already dead. Keeping the wedding house was useless. It would be better to sell it early and pool the money to buy a house for my younger brother. She also said that my younger brother is the lifeblood of the Lee family. If I don't use my money for my younger brother, am I going to give it to wild men? The tone and words were exactly the same as those of my good mother-in-law. If I didn't give money, she would make a fuss about jumping off a building, taking poison, and doing all kinds of things. I gave all my savings to my good younger brother. She was still not satisfied and forced me to sell the house. Like this. After making a fuss for 2 years, when she had another myocardial infarction, there was no time to rescue her and she died. In this life, I just hid for half a month. Her good son, whom she held in the palm of her hand and raised with great difficulty, actually watched her die just like that. There were also calls from old lady He. After learning that I had aborted the fetus, Charles was even more ambitious and wanted to work hard to find a young woman to give birth to a son for him. So, old lady He's days were very hard. Charles drank and gambled outside every day. Then, he was violent and beat her. He made a fuss about getting a divorce. In addition, what surprised me a little was that the message my younger brother Roman sent me was 5 days ago. In these 5 days, he didn't have a single message or call. I vaguely felt something was wrong in my heart. I was busy booking a plane ticket and preparing to go back. At this moment, I received a call from the police station. They said that my mom didn't die of myocardial infarction. Instead, my younger brother suffocated her to death with a pillow. Now that my younger brother has been arrested, they asked me where I was. I said, I'm in Sonia, and I'll be back soon. I hurriedly booked a plane ticket and went back. When I rushed to the police station, I learned that my younger brother went back to ask my mom for money. During the argument between the two, it triggered my mom's myocardial infarction. My good younger brother actually had an evil thought. Seeing her unconscious, he didn't call 120 for emergency help. Instead, he suffocated her to death with a pillow. After waiting for her to die, he then dialed 120. At first, everyone thought it was a death caused by sudden myocardial infarction. Later, a neighbor reported it, saying that he witnessed Roman killing someone. At that time, he was very scared. So, he didn't call the police in the first place. Since this daughter, was away, Roman didn't want to handle my mother's funeral either. Therefore, the body wasn't sent for cremation immediately. The forensic autopsy found that my mother indeed died of suffocation and not heart failure. As a result, Roman was convicted of murder. I listened quietly at the police station. Then, I took my mother's body and sent it for cremation. There wasn't too much grief in my heart. Instead, I suddenly felt relieved. In my previous life, my original family was a mess and extremely miserable. If it weren't for my mother constantly making a fuss and asking me for money, I wouldn't have been so weak as to be controlled by Dean's mother everywhere, giving birth to that bastard and leading to the later tragedy. In this life, I only hid for half a month, but the outcome is completely different. My original family can no longer bind me or drag me down. It can no longer be a greedy devil attached to me. As for Dean's mother, she is too busy to take care of herself. Charles had very bad luck. He lost all his money and still owed a lot of debts. He went home to ask Dean's mother for money. He also blamed Dean's mother for ruining his good luck. Soon, the little family fortune of the He family was also emptied. Charles had also thought about asking me for money again. He asked a lawyer, but the lawyer told him impossible. According to the inheritance law, I have settled the money with them clearly. My mother died, and my useless younger brother is in prison. I don't need to hide and avoid as originally planned. So, I am planning to look around and buy a small house. A life without people sucking blood, without people trampling and torturing is really good. I feel that the sky in my world is even bluer than before. Of course, while my side is sunny, Dean's mother's days are difficult. Charles gambled more and more, losing more and more. Since Dean's mother refused to divorce, naturally, he didn't manage to marry a young and beautiful woman to give birth to a son for him. Instead, he even mortgaged the house in his hometown. The women who used to revolve around him naturally ignored him when they saw that he had no money. By the end of the year, many people outside were asking him for loans. How could Charles have money? The house was also sealed up. It was said that it would be auctioned by the court after the new year. When he drank alcohol, he beat his wife and scolded her for being useless and unlucky, dragging down his good luck and not being able to give birth to a son. Even, he said that the death of his son was caused by Dean's mother. On this day, he got drunk outside again. After coming home and giving Dean's mother a beating and kicking, he vomited all over the place and fell asleep on the sofa. Dean's mother had always been shrewish. Thinking about it, her son was dead and her life had no hope. She couldn't live this life anymore. She ran to the kitchen, picked up a kitchen knife, and while Charles was drunk and unconscious, she chopped him to pieces. Then, she found a rope by herself, hung it on the ceiling fan, and left neatly. 5 days after the couple of the He family died, people found something was wrong. After calling the police broke in. The scene was extremely tragic. Given my bit of bad relationship with the He family, the police asked me for questioning. I said I knew nothing. I once read in a book that there is hidden savage beast lines S in humans' original genes. And unfortunately, I saw such savage beast lines S. And fortunately, I managed to break free from the beast lines S and escape.